welcome back. I hope you had a nice coffee break. Welcome back again to Brainbar. I'm sure, like myself, sometimes I'm a little bit afraid that a robot could do what I do. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm very curious about the future of work. What does this digital disruption mean for us? And we're going to talk now about the robot job robber, and we have the man himself, Shamus Rae from KPMG, who's the head of digital disruption in the UK, to tell us a little bit more about that. I'm just going to remind you that if you have questions, which I hope you do, to line up at the side at the end, because we'll have a question and answer session for then, so please do come up. But for now, I'd just like you to welcome Shamus Rae.
Thanks a lot. Morning, everybody. So my name is Shamus Rae. I look after digital disruption in KPMG. That basically means I'm not a boring accountant. I try and be more entertaining. And I'm going to hopefully try and keep you guys awake post-coffee. I've been told you're all quite technically literate, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the singularity. I've only got 10 minutes. But I'm here to talk about the future of work as we move towards the singularity. And so the singularity, whether it's 2045 or 2050 or 2100, whenever it's going to be, we don't know. And in fact, in 2015, 350 AI experts were asked when the Go problem was going to be solved, and the average answer was 2027. And of course, as you all know, the Go problem was solved 6 months later. So if an AI expert stands up and tries to predict the future, he knows shit. I'm an AI expert, and I'm going to tell you about the future. That normally gets a laugh, but OK. So look, I sit on the AI committee in Parliament in the UK, and we talk a lot about the future of work and the future of jobs. And we can look 10 years out or 15 years out at the singularity and get very worried, have a utopian or dystopian view. I don't think that's very helpful. I think we should be looking at what's going to be important over the next 5 to 10 years, and I think we should be thinking about the skills and capabilities which AI will take on over time. So instead of going, what's the world going to be like in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, let's think about the skills which AI can do today and what skills will it be able to do over the next few years. And I'm a bit of a fanboy for two people, one Elon Musk, and a guy called Professor Hinton. And if you don't know who Professor Hinton is, you should go and look him up. He's the godfather of artificial intelligence. In 1972, about when you were all born, or probably before you were born, he wrote the paper on deep learning and neural nets. In fact, he was completely out of fashion with the AI community only until a few years ago. And he's working on something really profound. He's working on a deep understanding of what the thoughts are behind a sentence. And I could go through exactly how that works, but I've only got 10 minutes. But suffice to say, he does 3 days a week with Google, 2 days a week with Toronto University. And where he wants to get to is that you can do a Google search in 2 or 3 years' time and say, look, I want to have an academic paper on AI and the impact on jobs. And it won't go and look for the words. It will understand the thought behind the sentence and will go away and find those academic papers with those thoughts and concepts in. Now, you may go to me, so what? Who cares? But think about all the lawyers. There are no lawyers in the room, I'm sure, right? Think about all the lawyers. And they are sitting there looking at regulations and laws and interpreting those laws, and then interpreting those laws in terms of clients. We don't need them anymore, right? This research is live and going in a lab in Toronto. And the time between being live in a lab in Toronto and being out in execution is shortening. We know that because of the recent experience with DeepMind's. Does everybody know DeepMind? Yeah, good. DeepMind last year did WaveNet, which is their voice piece, and it all came out 6 months later in Google I/O this year. So technology is moving fast. Let's look at the technology which is going to go over time. Now, this isn't something which is years away. The CEO of the World Bank actually says that this is having an impact today, right? So having an impact today, and we can see it going on. There's an investment bank. Nobody likes investment bankers, right? Anybody like investment bankers here? No, good. So there's an investment bank in the US which is automated 50% of their brokerage jobs in 6 months, right? And so it's not just low-end jobs, it's high-end jobs as well. And I think the quote's really quite honest about the impact that's having on jobs at the moment. And it's interesting also that if you take a survey of truck drivers in the US, half of them don't believe there'll be any automation in truck driving, right? But yet, we all know that AI systems are better at identifying objects on roads than we are. I drive a Tesla because I'm the head of digital disruption. I have to drive a Tesla, right? And here's the data point. I drive a Tesla. In reality, it kills somebody over every 350 million miles. And it's tragic. But we learn, right? We learn from every accident. You driving around in normal cars will kill somebody every 85 million miles. So we know from a data point of view that actually we don't want to discourage people using autopilot or anti-collision pieces. But suffice it, so we all know the truck drivers are screwed, right? We do know that, yeah? And we know that Uber's doing loads of stuff in terms of automation, and we know Uber, slightly difficult in this country because of the regulations, but Uber will have autonomous cars going all over the place. We are working as a firm with an autonomous car taxi service for London, and the first ones will be available next year. So what's the sweet spot? I sometimes call this the fuzzy tech spot. Do we need more data scientists? We do. We do. But we have AutoML, which is the Google kind of automation of data scientists, up and going, and that's quite an interesting thing. But what we need to do is actually have creativity. And we need people to be creative and understand technology. So all of you who didn't do a computing science A-level or a computing science degree, but actually did history or art, or actually we love you guys, right? We want you to be understand technology sufficiently to bring creativity into the job. We don't want to have repeatable work going forward, and that's not where the job market's going to be. So, my son, who's 15, is just doing some exams at the moment, and he's just about to decide on the exams he'll do at 18. And I said to him, what subjects do you want to do? And this is a true story, right? Far brighter than me. And he said, actually, I'm thinking about what jobs might exist in the future. And I said, so okay, so tell me what jobs do you think will exist in the future? And he said to me, think about a world where currency wasn't invented. Then ask yourself, does the job you have bring value to society? Does society see value in what you do? We could all go to a coffee shop and get a coffee which is actually made by a machine, which is as good as being made by a barista. But we choose to go to a coffee shop because we want the social interaction. I want somebody to tell me I'm looking good in the mornings. I don't get that at home, right? So I need somebody else to lie to me and tell me I'm good-looking, fun, and entertaining. So I go to a coffee shop where I regularly go and I have that interaction. Ask yourself, does what you do bring social purpose and value in the future? And I think his quote is exactly right. Technology, creativity, and value to society going forward. This is all happening as I go around talking to CEOs around the world. It's all happening far faster than you realize. 2/3 of CEOs in a recent CEO survey we did have the CEO owning the digital transformation personally. In the US, that's 91%. 91% of CEOs in the US now own digital disruption and transformation personally. And it's starting to move very quickly. If you look at organizations, legacy organizations, in the big pharmaceutical companies, the big retail banks, and the ones which are not embracing technology have a margin decline problem over 10 years. So if you want to know what jobs to do, it's about creativity, it's about technology, it's about social value, and you don't want to be going into an organization which isn't embracing that change and looking at pivoting the business. So I'm hoping that actually, of the 2/3 of companies which say they're going to pivot their business around a new business model in the next 3 years, I'm hoping that they are thinking about that in new ways, in inclusive ways, in ways which remove boring testosterone hierarchical organizations, ways which actually allow people to connect into work without necessarily having to be fully committed. Can I work from home? Can I be 3 days a week with one organization, 2 days a week with somebody else? So I think the lifelong careers are gone. But it does mean that you need to manage your own careers going forward. You cannot abdicate that responsibility to somebody else. Now, I put a whole load of things which we talk about a lot around the API economy, which you all know about. Distributed trust, I think, is a very interesting concept, which I'm happy to do questions on. But the Gini coefficient is where I want to finish on in my last 7 seconds. The Gini coefficient is a reflection of the income distribution between the 1 and the 99%. And at the moment in the States, it's at the worst point that it's been since 1937, which wasn't a great year politically, right? So we've got a Gini coefficient where more money is going to the 1% in terms of income, forget capital, than the 99%. At the same time, in the US, we have 25% of people in the US who are employed are doing jobs which are beneath their capability. That's 40% for those who are under 30. So this all needs proactive management and can't be just dealt with by politicians who want to avoid the subject. This needs to be engaged with via society, and we need to talk about it proactively. Unfortunately, I'd like to talk for an hour, but I've only got 10 minutes and I've had to stop. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Shamus. So I'm just going to, if you can join me up front, this would be great. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Shamus, please do line up at the side here. What will happen is Shamus will sit in the center chair, and whoever would like to ask a question, you can grab one here or here. And as I press the buzzer and you hear the sound, Shamus will turn from one question to the next. And I'll just like to ask you the first question. You talked about the Gini coefficient.
Yeah.
It does seem, though, that AI at the moment, the most advanced AI, is in the hands of some very wealthy corporations.
Right.
How do you see that being more evenly distributed?
Right. So I think that's right. And actually, the top 5 technology houses in the world are going to spend between $20 and $30 billion on research in AI, and only 5% of that will be acquisition. So they're going to carry on being at the forefront. The question is, can we do things around industry solutions that engages a wider society? There's no point in anybody in this room going, I can create, facial recognition which is better than, Google or Amazon or whatever. But actually, what can you use that for imaginative use cases? So the only way we can do that, I think, is by making it a fairer position in terms of data, access to data, using the commoditizing API calls, and making sure that we put the infrastructure in and retrain people to have a broader bunch of people coming in and getting involved in technology. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. So let's have our first question. I just remind you, guys, to actually ask a question as well. So we don't need to hear a speech. It would be great. So just a nice question for Shamus. Thank you.
No speeches.
So I'm actually going to start with a small speech. So each technological revolution completely changed the previous social order and created new forms of government. In the new age of AI, perhaps governments and corporations won't be as reliant on human labor anymore. That means that they will have a much higher bargaining power. So my question is, in the creation of new social contracts between the people and governments and corporations, as well as universal basic income, if it will be implemented, will it be implemented on our own terms? Will they take into account what the populace actually wants?
So, okay, I think that's a really good question. There's a big question mark about how much do we need government and how much do we need big corporations going forward, right? So I do think that we will still have a small number of large technology houses doing immense amount of research, and they're buying their way into creating the API economy. But over and above that, how much do we need government to do? So I think that, and big corporates. So I think there is an opportunity for us to readdress the percentage of business which is done by small organizations as well as the big. So to answer that question. do I think that governments will do things like universal basic income without us getting to what I call a pitchfork moment? You know, we all pick up the pitchforks and go to Parliament. I don't think they will. And the politicians that I talk to in Europe and in the UK, they understand the problem, but they don't feel empowered to make the change because they don't believe that the populace really understand and demanding change. So I think they won't, is the answer. So I think we do need to be more proactive as a society.
Thank you.
Hello. Do you think that there will come a time when all jobs can be automated? And if so, will people lose their sense of purpose and identity as a result?
Yeah, so there's a great quote from a US professor which says, everything that can be described can be automated in time. And I believe that. But the question is, who's doing the describing? So I think there will be jobs in the future which will be about describing. I do believe there will be jobs which society sees as having a social purpose, and we want and demand that people are doing those. However, that's not going to employ everybody, right? I'm a bit of a dystopian person in that respect. But I also know I'm a bloke, right? I am simple, and I have an objective, and I go away and do it. Women are far more complex. But therefore, I need to have some structure to do things. But it doesn't have to be working for a corporate. It doesn't have to be going, what's the P&L going to be in the next quarter? I could do something with more societal benefit. So I think we do need to have things to do, but I don't think it has to be about big jobs.
Hello. What do you think in 2015, a big corporation like KPMG, how will it look like in case of AI, in case of labor?
Yeah, so good question. And I own that model, right, for KPMG in terms of what it could be. Doesn't mean it's going to be that, right? So I think actually we're going to be a data-driven organization. And again, everything that we can automate, we will automate. So large parts of our tax business, our audit business, et cetera, will be automated. But for those pieces of work which carry on, you know, strategy work, et cetera, we'll carry on doing that work, but it'll be heavily augmented by technology. And having access and understanding and depth of, you know, insight, which is going to be driven by technology. So I think we're going to be a lot more a platform organization with open APIs, and we will create ecosystems of startups around us, which will be working off the same data. This is my vision for the firm, right? The chairman sometimes debates this with me, but that's where I think we should be.
I like that. Thanks.
Hello. So you spoke about jobs and AI, but what about us? I mean, could it happen that machines kill the entire human race or makes us into slaves, just like in the Matrix?
So, so there are two different views of that. Obviously, there is the view that once we get to superintelligence, and you should read the Nick Bostrom book, you know, that actually things will escalate away, and unless we put the right controls and values in, we're all in trouble. And then there's the Ray Kurzweil view. Ray Kurzweil, a really genuinely great futurologist, his view is that actually we'll have brain implants and we will then be at one with the AI, right? I think Homo sapiens 2.0 will be genetically modified and we'll do that ourselves. I think we'll be connected up to the AI cloud as much as possible. I personally won't do that. I'm going to sit somewhere in some farm and put the barriers up and hide. But I think you people who are younger, you'll be implanted. Otherwise, we're not going to win.
Thank you very much.
Hello. I'm sure you've heard of the human-like robot Sophia,
Yeah.
and the famous sentence that she, if we can call her she,
Yeah.
will destroy humans. Do you fear as an expert when artificial intelligence becomes more intelligent than humans? Do you fear this point?
Yeah, I do fear that point. And I think people who deny it are linear thinkers, right? Because they just go, well, it's actually all suddenly go on a linear basis. And I don't know if you saw a paper the other day, but it looked at the, because we worry about Moore's law and quantum computing, et cetera, but quantum computing is going to come, right? I was at a breakfast with Satya Nadella a couple of weeks ago in London, and he was saying he's going to have the first quantum computing up in the cloud in 5 years' time. And that's going to have a dramatic impact in terms of processing power. So I do think it's going to come. It's too dangerous to try and predict when it's going to be. But it'd be naive to say that at some point it won't happen. And I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, but I think it will happen, yeah.
My question would be that you mentioned that intellectual curiosity will be a key skill in the
Yes.
future. Does this mean that experience in more fields will be much more valuable than knowledge in a small subject?
Yes, so that's completely right. And if you look at the education system we've created over the last 100 years, it's a manufacturing education system. We want to create cookie cutters of types of people. So we want you to do maths and sciences, or we want you to do arts and languages. And if you look at what we do to creativity during the education process, we kill it. And we actually kill intellectual curiosity as well, right? And that's nuts. And I think people who are intellectually curious should be engaging. You know what? Everybody in this room should go and watch a Professor Hinton lecture, which you can get online, and you can understand what the work he's doing on now. If you're not intellectually curious, you're dead, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks for being here. He asked partially my question. So you're talking about the future of jobs. How about the schooling systems and the universities, which is still teaching the traditional civic science and mathematics? So if you see the students and the kids, they don't know much about artificial intelligence, robotics, cybersecurity, big data. So if you see the demand in Hungary is much higher than the supply of the people who are educated in those areas. So how do you think the schooling systems or the government should bring in that?
So I'm on a personal crusade to, I'm kind of global and travel around the world, but I'm on a global crusade to talk to every head teacher in the UK in groups. We've got 23,000 schools, and I've done 13% so far, right? And what I'm discovering by going around is head teachers aren't going to change. I want them to change, and I want them to engage in the technology and understand about intellectual curiosity and the speed of innovation, but they're not going to. So I think we need to do something. There's an experiment going on in Australia at the moment where they've gone, the power in education is at the school level. So how do we create a structure above schools, which schools can go and send kids to for 2 days a month or whatever, where they can learn about blockchain and AI and data science, etc. Because it's easier to do that than actually change the schooling system, because that will take 10 years. And you know what? We don't have 10 years. So I'm passionate that we need to get all the head teachers to understand what's going on. I accept they won't change, but we need to put some infrastructure in to allow children to learn and understand about AI, etc. And I've got to tell you, the number of schools in the UK which don't do computing science up until 18 is shocking.
This will be the last question.
Oh, got to be good.
Yeah. It's nice meeting you. Well, I have just I want your suggestion on a simple thing, like machine on robots on a general thing, like they make our work easier, and it is like they provide us with good opportunities, and there are no mistakes. They provide us accuracy. But on behalf of that, I would like to ask, like, all the hardships would be removed. There would be no mistakes. So it's also said that in the absence of mistakes, we can't learn anything. Like, with the help of Google, and I would search everything, but I wouldn't go for it. Like, even I have to travel for something, I would just open Google Maps, but I won't travel on my own. Like, I won't take up the hardships. It would make it so easier. Like, other person say that, okay, health is a good thing. So they will just open the YouTube and say, okay, give me some tips about exercise and all that stuff. They won't go out of their room for studying.
Yeah.
For running, sorry. And,
so what's your question?
My question is like, all these hardships would be removed. So there will be no building of the mind and no growing of the muscles.
So I agree, right? And we need to make sure that we don't spend the whole time. You know,
people will become lazy.
We need a heads-up campaign, right? So move away from, and it's about being curious, intellectually curious, and creative. And actually, most of the big step forwards we've made in science over the last 100 years have been mistakes, right? And if we have systems which are perfect, then we won't spot the mistakes to go, actually, that's really interesting for this over here. So I think it's a big danger, but we need to be proactive about things. I agree with you. I mean, there's no answer to the question other than we need to enjoy the mistakes and understand how we can learn from them. We need to go and experience things rather than just have a VR life. I think the VR life could be very dangerous, I think, for lots of social and values reasons.
And also the jobs of the other people, they would be eliminated because robots would be more accurate. They would just eliminate the people.
Yeah, but you won't make mistakes and learn.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shamus,
Pleasure.
thanks so much for joining us. Yeah. So we are going to be taking a break. There are food trucks outside, and our next program starts at 1:20. I encourage you very much to go and have a look around. We have a smaller stage upstairs, and at the back, the Fun Factory has some exhibitions and interesting talks in the future there too. So please join us later on. Thank you.